Welcome to Phil Jordan Psychic Sleuth. I thought today we would talk about a phenomenon that people are intrigued by that is part of the supernatural. Some people think not, but I think so. Unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, have been a controversial subject, I think, throughout the history of humankind. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories about that. There's a lot of evidence about UFOs. And a lot of the evidence is backed by people who have experienced a UFO phenomenon, who were common people, professional people, very sound in mind, very intellectual. And I think it creates an intrigue in me that will always be there. My first experience with UFO phenomenon occurred in 1964, in the spring of 1964. I was 14 years old, and there was a farmer in Newark Valley, which was, as the crow flies, over the hills, probably 15 miles from my home. And a man was out in his fields at his farm. His name was Gary Wilcox. And he claimed that he saw a bright, shining object in the field, at the edge of the field, and he thought somebody had dumped like a refrigerator or perhaps a washer, dryer, something of that nature. So he drove his tractor over to investigate it, and it was a UFO. It was a flying saucer type object. And he was able to touch it, and pretty soon, two beings appeared from that object. And they were about, I think, as I recall, 4 foot in height. And it looked like they had one eye, and they were sort of silver. Well, obviously, to me, that would be a spacesuit. It wasn't their eye, as far as that goes. And he said that he conversed with them for over 2 hours. And they talked about farming and things like that. And of course, the natural tendency for us humans would be, why would they want to know about farming? Well, apparently the atmosphere, they claim to be from what we call Mars, is what they said. And the atmosphere was changing, and they wanted to know, I think, how they could grow food and things like that and adapt to a new environment. And of course, he was trying to keep it confidential, and it leaked out, and the news got it, and it was a big uproar in the area. And you had a choice of two sides to take: believe or not believe. And I believed. I knew in my heart at 14 that that was a reality, that I felt he was telling the truth. I never questioned that whatsoever. The only thing that puzzled me, and still puzzles me today until very recently, is the fact that he communicated to them in English. And you would think a foreign entity from another planet especially would not speak English. However, very recently, just in the last week, I was at a restaurant and I watched a man and woman there. The woman could not speak English. He could not speak Spanish. And I saw him struggle with that. And of course, I speak some Spanish, having been a Spanish teacher. And they struggled, but they had their phone set to an app which would translate what he said in English to Spanish, what she said in Spanish to English. And if a culture was advanced more than we were back in 1964, they could very easily have had a way that when Gary Wilcox spoke to them in English, it interpreted to them what was being said, and vice versa. It's just 60 years later, we're getting to that, which proves another point to me, which I'll discuss later. When I was doing radio shows on WNBF in Binghamton, I had a minister from Endwell, New York, Reverend Barry Downing, who had written a book called The Bible and UFOs, where he took incidences in the Bible and related them to UFO phenomenon, such as the burning bush. He told how that could have very easily been a UFO phenomenon. And there's a lot of things that have happened in the Bible that could be attributed to UFO phenomenon. I don't dispute that. And in the world in which we live, there are a lot of places that if you go over them in the air, it can be made to look like a landing strip for UFOs. But they've been there for thousands of years. And I think it's very probable that at one time, Earth may have been inhabited by a culture, a humanity a bit different from ours. And maybe they knew the end of the world was coming as they knew it, so they were advanced and were able to take off, and they've either come back, or I guess my belief in UFO also has a connotation, sort of a religious connotation, and especially to my faith. I believe that the God of my understanding is pure love and pure wisdom. Now, if we believe that the God that I understand, if we believe that God created the universe and all that's in it, and I think that we would have to also consider the fact that, yes, he created humanity through Adam and Eve, but he would also know and understand human emotions, which we see every day, anger, greed, and eventually that population could destroy themselves. So in creating the universe, I think it's very possible that other humanoids were placed on other planets or even in other universes. They may not have been fighting as much as we humans. They might have been more advanced in their technology and working on their technology, advanced intellectually. And so I think it's possible that they got to us before we got to them. We certainly have made great strides in our exploration of outer space. And I think that eventually we may find that that we're going to be the UFOs on another planet or in another part of the universe, which I think will be really intriguing. In going back to the incident in April of 1964, I was 14 years old, and it intrigued me. It absolutely intrigued me. So I rode my bicycle all over the hills between Candor and Newark Valley, hoping that I could see a UFO. And the interesting part for me was that I had no fear whatsoever. If I saw them, I would be thrilled. I just wanted to see that. And I, of course, didn't see that. But knowing my spiritual self, I think that validated to me that I truly believed, that I knew there was something to that. Then I find out later that on the same day in Socorro, New Mexico, a very similar incident happened where a spaceship landed and got fertilizer samples or rock samples or something and these people came out, got back in the ship and took off at the exact same day that it happened in Newark Valley, New York. So that aroused my curiosity. And one other time, probably in the early 1990s, I was with my adopted sister's mother, the woman that raised her, and we were in Ithaca, and we heard a strange sound, not like a plane, but we looked up and there was a oblong object going over the sky that was probably about the size of I would say half of a football field. And it had 6 lights coming down. And it could not be explained as an airplane because it was low enough that you could see that it was large and had 6 lights on it. And it wasn't a blimp. It wasn't a Zeppelin or anything like that. And so my sister's mother thought for sure that it was a UFO. And the more I reflect back on that, the more I think probably it was a UFO. Some of the sightings that have taken place with UFOs are by people such as police officers, doctors, lawyers, other common folk, but people that have been interviewed, tested, and have come to an understanding that it was some sort of a phenomenon that was not common to our everyday life as we know it. And I think that with some of these sightings, there's also been, I think there was, I forget where it was, maybe in New Hampshire, that a couple was abducted and taken in a spaceship and then brought back, I think the next day or something. And they couldn't remember everything that happened, but under hypnosis, they were able to bring forth some information. So it arouses my curiosity, and I guess I believe that UFO phenomena has been around since the beginning of humanity, and perhaps before modern man. And there's evidence of that that's recorded in the Bible. There's evidence of that that's recorded throughout history. And it's just a unique phenomenon that I feel there's got to be some validity to that. As we look at the UFO phenomenon, we come to an understanding that we may not be alone, that we may have people among us that are interplanetary. I'm not sure that's the case because it seems like every UFO landing has been they could see the humanoids and they get back in and they take off. So apparently they just don't want to stick around on planet Earth, and probably because of what goes on planet Earth. And so I think that as we look at the UFO phenomenon, it not only inspires and intrigues thought, but it also validates that there's things beyond human recognition, things beyond human knowledge that we may not be able to explain. Now, there's a lot of conspiracies that the government is holding information and for our own good, or that they know a lot more about that. And of course, you have the southwestern site. What is the? I can't think of the name of it. Where a lot of phenomenon has taken place, and I think that if it really occurred the way, I think the government will investigate it, but I don't think it's anything that needs to be hidden. They might think they've got to hide it to protect us in some capacity. But I think a transparency with that would be a very positive thing. The other intrigue that I have with it is that I have no fear of that, not only psychically within myself, but I have no fear because I think that if they were hostile, there would have been incidences of people being killed, or, some sort of an incident that would show their hostility. I think it's just something where they're trying to gain knowledge for their own purpose, as far as that goes. And there was many occurrences in the decade of the 60s of UFO phenomenon. And I think that it goes in spurts. And I've noticed that often it's in April, often it's in August, and often it's in October. For some reason, those 3 months seem to have a presence of UFO phenomenon. I think one of the difficult things in the future is that we, the world, Earth, has polluted the astral bodies, the space, with so much space junk from satellites, from our exploration of space, that there's so much space junk going around. Just this week, there was something that came down and went through the roof of a house into the through the second floor into the floor of the first floor, and they think that was space junk that came. And it was on TV yesterday about this bright ball of fire going across the sky in broad daylight, a perfectly blue sky, and that could have been perceived as a UFO, but they sort of identified that as space junk. So now the encounters that we have with UFO phenomena is going to be sort of a pool or mixed source of, is it space junk? Is it a UFO? What is it? And there's many different theories about some of the wonders of the world, like the Great Pyramids. They didn't know how they were built. They have ideas how they were built. Stonehenge, that had something to do with astronomy or astrology, and that could have very easily been constructed through some sort of a UFO type phenomenon. I think it's Machu Picchu. Other places where there's been these landing sites that you go over in a plane, and very much for a lengthy several mile length, it shows structures that were in the ground that could very easily have directed a UFO to their landing site. I suspect when we do discover in a more involved way, other than Newark Valley or Socorro, New Mexico, those isolated incidences, when we do discover these humanoid people, I think they're going to be very much like us. I think that, like I said, when the universe was created, the creator would not risk putting them all in one place for fear that they would destroy themselves. And I think history shows us that we, as humans, do have a tendency to destroy ourselves or destroy each other. And so I suspect that eventually we will find colonies of people, not just in one other place like Mars, but some other universe, some other planet. And we've cut back on our space exploration. One thing, when I go to church in the Episcopal Communion, there's a prayer that we pray for God's blessing on the universe and Earth, our island home, is what the prayer says. And I think that's what Earth is, our island home. I think the universe is so intriguing that we will never find everything out that needs to be found out. But isn't it intriguing, some of the things that not only people have seen, but some of the structures that we question how they were made, how they came about, how they have their being. And a lot of that there is no explanation for. And if you look a little deeper on that from a religious standpoint, some of the miracles of Jesus, some of the miracles in the Bible, they don't have any explanation, and it's because you have to accept them on faith. And if your faith is strong enough, you accept them. You don't allow yourself to go beyond reasonable doubt necessarily, but you have to accept them on faith. And I think that it strengthens my faith to know that there are other beings somewhere else in the universe that are coming to us before we get to them. And I hope that that intrigues the thoughts of other people. I was always told growing up that there'll be a lot of things in life that you can't explain. Those are things you have to accept on faith because they really have no explanation. They really have no definition. It's like the concept of love. For thousands of years, humanity has tried to give a definition to love. You can't give a definition to what love is because it's an intrinsic feeling within the heart that has no explanation. When you experience it, whether it's with another person, whether it's with your profession, your chosen profession, when that comes into your being, there is no explanation or definition of the feeling that it creates. And I think that it's the same way with UFO phenomenon. We tend to stop and think about it, and perhaps we want to believe in it because it is so intriguing, but there's also an awful lot of proof that it's real. And I don't think we can ever get the answer to it because right now it's not definable. Right now doesn't have an explanation. But everyone has an opinion. Everyone has their thoughts of what it is. For me, it's just common sense that intrigues me. In 1964, the spaceship landed. 2 humanoids got out, and this farmer in Newark Valley talked to them for 2 hours. And he told them about fertilizers. So they wanted a sample of fertilizer. So I think he took a 40-pound bag of fertilizer and left it in the field. And he went back the next day and it was gone. So they apparently came and got it. But they also took rock samples, and they were carrying trays of like grass and weeds and soil and things like that. Same thing in Socorro, New Mexico. And humans at that time, I remember saying, why would they take rock? Why would they take soil samples? Why would they take grass? Why would they want fertilizer? And it made no sense to anybody. Only 5 years later, in July, I think it was July 29th of 69, I was working in a restaurant at the time, and there was a TV in the kitchen, and it was the night that we landed on the moon. And, of course, the moon was a barren place. And the spaceship landed, and pretty soon out comes a humanoid dressed in that outfit with a shield in front of the face, could look like one eye. And what did they do? They got out, gathered rock samples, soil samples, got back in their spaceship, and took off. But that was okay, because that was Americans. That was humans that were supposedly the most intellectual beings in the universe. But 5 years previous, it was very questioned and very ridiculed to this poor farmer that he had witnessed such a thing. And here we witnessed the exact same thing 5 years later in July of 69. And only in 5 years, we came to accept that we could get to another place in the universe. Simply the moon and Mars and all those other places are much further. Their environment is not conducive, perhaps, to human life. But maybe our planet is conducive to their life. And so I'm very intrigued as to what will transpire in the future, because I think we will come to know, it will be proven to us, and I hope in my lifetime, that we can have a factual thing occur. The part that worries me is, will we as humans, with something we fear, will we want to destroy it rather than embrace it? Because we see the human emotions led by fear. We want to destroy what we're fearful of. We don't want it to be around. We see that more and more as life goes on. And so I hope that if we do have a close encounter of the third kind, so to speak, that we can embrace that we can understand that too is something that was created by a supreme being, a God of our understanding. And I think that it will help us to explain some of the structures in the world, like Stonehenge, the Great Pyramids, and things that really have made us take note and wonder, how did that happen? And I think I'm going to do a podcast on miracles at some point. And they've always intrigued me, from St. Bernadette right on through out in the southwestern, I think it's in Arizona, maybe it's New Mexico. There was a little mission church where the nuns, to get in the choir loft, had to climb a ladder. And so there was a man that came there, and he was a carpenter. and he offered to build a spiral staircase. They've investigated the spiral staircase. It does not have nails, and it's all built without nails, but very well built, and they have used it for a long time to get to the choir loft. And they went to thank the man, and he was gone. They have no idea who he was, but they sort of convey that they thought it was a carpenter that was well known through the centuries that came about with the birth of Christ. And it's part of their belief. And when you see that staircase, you just know the phenomenon that went into that to build it. The person had no blueprints, no anything. He built it in a short time and then left. So there's many things in our life that we will see that it intrigues us enough to want to believe, but do we really believe? Part of my faith is to know in my heart, not my head. I don't want my head to talk me out of it, but to know in my heart what is there and what is not there. What will benefit me, what might benefit society, what might benefit the world in which we live. And I think those are the whispers of a supreme being that touch our hearts, that take us into our career, into exploring our gifts and exploring what we're meant to do in this world. And I feel bad that this farmer in 1964 was ridiculed to the point where he just had to stay away from everybody. And I feel bad that that occurred for him, but it shows me one thing. It shows me more truth than fiction, because he had to know that it happened. And the more people tried to tell him it didn't happen or try to explain what it was, he could never get away from the truth. And the truth helped him to maintain himself through the ridicule of the world around him. It's sort of like in my career as a psychic. Throughout my life, strong-willed, fundamentalist, religious people have said my ability is evil or satanic. And it's evil and satanic to them because they don't understand it. To me, it's a glorious gift that I have. I mean, if it's evil, why would I be led to solve homicide cases that are documented on YouTube now, and psychic detectives, and 20 different homicide cases that I've solved using my gift? And so everyone's going to have a different opinion about things, but their opinion is their opinion. My understanding and my faith is my understanding and my faith. And I encourage everybody to have that be part of your faith journey, that you know who you are and always know your own goodness and let that goodness overcome any evil. So that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Well, that sounds good. I think a lot of people may experience the same thing, or, some type of UFO incident, and are just afraid to tell anybody because of the ridicule. And
that's one thing that happened in 64. Several people came forward saying they had seen things. But years later, it comes out that many other people saw things at that time, and especially that summer, and they didn't dare to say anything for fear people would think they were nuts. And so, and that's happened in my work, that people have thought I was nuts my whole life. And it's because they couldn't explain what I do. There's times I can't explain what I do. I just know that I can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Makes sense. I'm sure we'll experience more and more UFO activity going forward.
Yeah, I think like with Barry Downing writing the book, The Bible and UFOs, that took a great leap of faith to do that, to explore those incidences and to come up with theory and thought about what happened. And it shows that he he had an intellect that made common sense out of a phenomenon that couldn't be explained. And so I think that you have to take a leap in faith every once in a while, no matter what your career is, and come to understand that there will be things in life that you can't explain. So just either accept it or don't accept it, and don't try to explain it.
Yeah, that actually happened to me when I was a kid, like 12 years old, 13 years old, playing basketball in the driveway. And I've probably only told like one other person. But a buddy of mine and I were playing basketball, and we saw an aircraft like 3 houses down, hovering really low. And we freaked out, got scared, and ran inside the house. And I think actually he ran down the street to his house, and I wasn't going to run down with him. So I haven't told anybody that hardly.
And a lot of the sightings are very similar incidences where kids have seen that. And I think it's because they're more receptive to seeing it. And then when the reality sets in, it becomes fearful. So they have to get away from it, so to speak. But when we talk about miracles, we'll have to talk about the 3 kids in Fatima that saw the Blessed Mother, and the things that came from that. Saint Bernadette, she was a youngster. And for some reason, I think kids don't question phenomenon as much as the adults do.
Mm-hmm.
They're a bit fearless when it comes to things like that. So it's intriguing to them.
All right.
Well, I've enjoyed sharing my thoughts. I hope some of the others will have thoughts. If you have questions, send them to
Phil Jordan Psychic at gmail.com.
Phil Jordan Psychic at gmail.com. My new book is out. It's A Winter's Journey. It's a brief novel, spiritual novel, and a very good read. I also have an autobiography that I published about 20 years ago, and I still have that available through my office. You can write and ask about that. And I also have done a children's book on grief with a workbook in the back of it, and that's called Mrs. Quigley Died One Day. And I am doing another book now about a young boy that also takes a spiritual journey and meets his guides and people in the spirit world. So that's becoming very intriguing for me, and that should be done by this fall, I would think. So, and I do have consultations available over the phone or in person. So,
and check out philjordan.com for other information and
for phone numbers and email addresses, and you can do that at philjordan.com. Thank you.
Thank you.